The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Ocarina of Time. By Ganondorf 8. May 20, 2015. Chapter 72, The Final Battle.
Quite inconvenient that two Stalfos would appear now,
said Spike.
Well, they are preventing us from escaping, so I need to take care of them before this castle collapses on top of us. I am surprised that these two are the regular variations rather than what we saw here during our climb up the tower. If this is meant to be Ganondorf's attempt to slow us down, then he's done a pretty terrible job, given I can use the big Goron's sword to destroy them in no time,
I said.
I have a feeling these are the ones that can pull themselves back together when defeated,
said Spike.
Really? It's been a while since we last saw that kind, and I've forgotten how those ones work,
I said.
This version acts and behaves like the others do, yet when they are defeated, they fall to pieces rather than simply burn away, which is what often happens. The problem is they will repair themselves within a minute after being felled, so unless you beat any others within the area fast enough, they will keep coming back, and waste our time, which we don't have right now,
said Spike. Now I was starting to remember what happened when I faced this particular Stalfos back in the forest temple, but I wish I could forget, as it was quite the painful experience. If it wasn't for those fairies, I would have perished there, and not even be here right now, hoping to save Twilight from being trapped in that circle of fire. She was really calm despite being in her current predicament, yet I guess she is used to this sort of thing given what she experienced when her father was killed.
How much time do you think we have left before the castle falls?
I asked.
About 3 minutes, give or take, so defeating these monsters is imperative,
replied Spike.
I'm going to go with the big Goron's sword, as while it will leave me unable to defend myself, I need to defeat them quickly, and hoping neither of them will repair themselves, otherwise we'll be here for a while,
I said.
It all depends on how they choose to attack you, as Stalfos are very intelligent,
said Spike. If I recall correctly, by focusing on one of them, the other will just pace about until it sees an opportunity to attack, but can I be fast enough to defeat them, and free Twilight without wasting too much of our remaining time? One Stalfos then suddenly performed a jump attack which did catch me by surprise, and resulted in me being slashed in the chest, but it's a wound I must ignore, as I can't afford to waste what little time we have. Drawing the big Goron's sword from its scabbard, I walked towards the Stalfos which attacked me, and waited for the moment to strike, which is when it drops its guard. It paced about for a few seconds before slashing using its crooked sword, but I avoided its blows where I slashed it across its ribcage, which wasn't enough, but perhaps one more will do the trick. It then jumped backwards before walking forward again with its shield raised, and that was going to make things slightly annoying given how I can't get around those shields.
These two are stalling, I said. Which means you need to defeat them quickly before time runs out,
said Spike.
Can't I use my magic?
I asked.
The last time you did that, you used earth magic, which made sense because you were in the forest temple at the time, but I don't know if you can harness the earth's might here given what's happening around us,
replied Spike.
I've often relied on what I believed to be the tried and true method, which was my fire magic, and that's what I used throughout the first half of our journey, Spike, as I had no clue as to how to use a sword back then. Back in Equestria, we unicorns relied on our magic to solve a problem, and only the Canterlot Royal Guard used spears, which needed magic of course as they lacked hands. I just realized that circle of fire which has trapped Twilight within it is about to become very useful to me,
I said.
How so?
asked Spike.
If I can concentrate carefully, I can manipulate the flame into moving away from her, and onto them, thus trapping them. The only problem is that I have two Stallfoes who want me dead, and I can't deal with them and try to move something at the same time. Maybe defeating one will give me a free moment to focus, but it would mean taking a few hits as I'll be unable to fight back until I'm ready, which should take about 20 seconds.
I replied.
Maybe you should stick with swords,
suggested Spike.
We're in a hurry, so using magic would make things go faster,
I said. The first Stallfoes then performed a jump attack which I caught out of the corner of my eyes, and avoided it, although I did suffer a slight gash on my left shoulder which wasn't all that serious, yet I responded with another slash against its ribs which did shattered it into pieces that scattered all over the floor.
That's one of them down,
said Spike.
The other Stallfoes is on the other side of the room, so that gives me a few moments to concentrate,
I said. Focusing my mind on the circle of fire in order to move it away from Twilight, I discovered that the flames couldn't be moved, as though a powerful magic was preventing me from manipulating them.
I can't move the flames from her, which must mean Ganondorf has enchanted it before he died, so now we need to try something else.
I quickly looked around as I had little time left before the first Stallfoes comes back to life, and I noticed the smoldering rocks all over the place because of the castle crumbling. Surely, I'll be able to manipulate these unless the evil king has used his magic on these too. While I could just lift a rock up with my hands because of having the golden gauntlets, it was too risky to try it, as I'd be weighed down by the debris, and that would give those Stallfoes a chance to kill me, which is possible given how I have no more fairies. Focusing, I manipulated the rocks to levitate before they went flying into the other Stallfoes, which damaged it considerably, but sadly the other one managed to come back to life, and joined in, which means this idea has gone bust.
Now you need to defeat the first one again,
said Spike.
It's the forest temple situation come back to haunt me,
I moaned.
Don't panic, as that can cause mistakes, but you need to switch to the big Goron's sword, and defeat both of them even faster. We've wasted too much time in this room already, and we still have half of the tower to climb down before we can get out of here,
said Spike.
Not helping here, you know,
I moaned.
Then perhaps I can provide you with the necessary assistance,
said Twilight.
I assumed you couldn't do anything given that circle of fire prevents you from escaping,
I said.
My movement may be restricted, but my magical powers remain free, so allow me to manipulate the debris and help you defeat these wicked creatures. Your fairy is correct about us having wasted much time, and now the darkness shall experience what I am capable of. I suggest you stand aside, Sunset Shimmer, for you shall witness what can happen were I to lose control,
said Twilight. Did she just seriously say that she loses control whenever her emotions boil up with rage, just like me? My friends in the human world have often said that the two of us were like sisters because we're both gifted in magic, and we did get taught by the same teacher, but Twilight is an alicorn while I remain a unicorn. It's not bad, because she has been through a lot in Equestria, which has tested her resolve constantly, so you might say I'm relieved to not have the same responsibilities. Twilight then began to focus her magical power, which was even more immense than mine, but it didn't make me feel jealous, as she was already feeling exhausted, so she can't keep it going for very long, but it was enough to manipulate the smoldering rocks to cause them to smash into the Stallfoes, destroying both of them at the same time.
That was really impressive, I said. My magic is very powerful, but it is not as refined as yours,
smiled Twilight.
But you are clearly stronger, I said. Power is not everything, you know, Sunset Shimmer, for you know what it can do to a person if they allow it to consume them. While it is true that my magic is better than yours, I lack the proper experience to use it as I never got to practice when I was younger. If you recall, I developed a natural talent in the magical arts at a young age which surprised my father, yet he believed that I didn't need to use it because we were living in peace. He also felt that it would distract me from my obligations as the Princess of Hyrule, and while I would agree with him back then, in the here and now, I wish that I had been given more time to master my magic. Impa taught me much during these past 7 years, but she could only go so far,"
said Twilight.
"I used to have a teacher who taught me magic, and she believed that I was destined for great things as a unicorn, but I chose to follow a different path because of being consumed with wanting to be an alicorn. Not a day goes by that I curse the fact that I allowed my own lust for power to take down the path of evil where I betrayed my mentor, and cast aside her guidance and going at it on my own,"
I said.
"You made some bad choices in your life which did bring you down, but you have since changed this perception. I can sense this inside of your heart, and I know you will never become the way you used to be,"
said Twilight. While her mannerism and choice of words made things rather awkward, she still was the same friend who gave me a second chance. It was at that point where both of us were reminded that we needed to get out of Ganondorf's castle because it was still falling down around us, so we made our way over to the next passageway blocked by iron bars.
"Do you recall how many floors exist within the tower?" "If I include the throne room, there are 5 floors,"
I replied.
"We do not have much far to go as we are currently on the 2nd floor, yet I suspect the main entrance to the castle has been blocked off by falling debris. If this is the case, then our only escape route at this point is to use the back entrance,"
said Twilight.
"There is another entrance?"
I asked.
"Yes, and we will need to use it, otherwise we shall be killed,"
replied Twilight.
"Why would Ganondorf have a back door to his castle?"
I asked.
"Some things about the evil king are best for us not to know because it is dangerous to try and pry into the mind of such an evil man, but if I were to make a guess, he needed a means of escaping should he ever face the prospect of being defeated. While I was imprisoned, I learned that he was afraid of facing you, yet denied it as being true, but I could tell he feared you as you were determined to make him pay for what he has done to Hyrule,"
replied Twilight.
"It sounds like I'm being portrayed as a villain,"
I said.
"You were not doing this for revenge, but to bring peace back to the land,"
said Twilight.
"Did he ever explain why he did this?"
I asked.
"At first I thought his words were nothing but lies, which is something he has been known to do, but when he explained to me the reasons behind his desire to conquer Hyrule, I secretly had sympathy for him and his people. If only the Gerudo had been more open when it came to their situation, then perhaps things could have been different than what they ended up being,"
replied Twilight. She then revealed that Ganondorf desired Hyrule as he coveted the warm winds which existed in the field, for the desert suffered from harsh cold winds which brought death. His aim was to give his people a better life, but something changed as he was growing up, and he became determined to conquer the world. His surrogate mothers wanted to make the Gerudo dominant after generations of being mistreated, and coerced the evil king into becoming their means of achieving such a goal. Yet he never had a choice, for he was so young and vulnerable to influence. I said that he could never be reformed, but the truth was that his actions were placed onto him. When Twilight finished her explanation, she noticed the expression on my face, and she sensed I felt sympathetic as well.
"Many things are blurry until they come into focus, and the evil king's actions originally were for his people as he was concerned with their well-being. Perhaps his mothers were not the only influence which made him what he is, but rather something else from a bygone era. He was inspired by something from long ago?
I asked.
The history of this land is shrouded in mystery, as much was never recorded,
replied Twilight.
Do you know what records of the past were kept or survived?
I asked.
According to the information as decreed within these records, this land was once a battleground where an evil demon rose up from the underworld in an attempt to claim the Triforce with an army of demonic monsters, but it was destroyed and sealed within the blade which you now hold in your hands, the Master Sword. What exactly happened back then has been lost to history, but it is said that the demon placed a curse onto this land where one day he would be reborn. At first, I could not believe such a legend, but upon seeing what Ganondorf has done during these past 7 years, I suspect that the curse turned out to be very real, and that the evil king is the demon having been reborn. The curse also stated the chosen hero, and the eventual royal family would be doomed to experience the hatred of the demon every few centuries,
said Twilight. Not the most charming of stories I've heard, but it does shed some light on how the cycle of hatred has a tendency to repeat itself far too often. I'm not sure if this will affect anything from here, but it does make sense how a future version of Ganondorf can exist. As she used her magic to allow us to continue down towards the bottom of the tower, I started to think about what this world used to be like. It must have been a pretty harsh time, although who is to say for certain? Upon reaching the outside of the castle again, I could see the ground, although it looks the bridge created by the sages is on the other side where the main entrance is. If we leave via the back entrance, which is most likely, we'll have to go around to the castle's front entrance, and make our way across the bridge before we get crushed from above.
We've got a problem,
began Spike.
What is it?
I asked.
There is another gap in front of us, Sunset Shimmer, but this one drops down quite a ways,
replied Spike.
I know I can make such a jump, yet I'm not sure if Twilight will be able to. I know she was trained in the ways of the Sheikah, but did that include something like this, especially when a building is collapsing all around you?
I asked.
We don't have time to think about it, as we have about just over a minute before this place comes down,
replied Spike.
Is there a problem?
asked Twilight.
Can you see that gap in front of us?
I asked.
Yes, and it seems to be a long drop down to the next part of the walkway. While Impa did teach me much, which includes being able to get through an obstacle such as this, I feel that you are concerned for my safety, and so I shall allow you to help me out because it would make you feel a lot better,
replied Twilight. I told her that I needed her to climb onto my back, and that I would jump down to the walkway below. She said that it may be too much for me because her weight on top of my equipment would drag me down, but I told her that I was used to this. Twilight was surprised at how confident I was with my abilities, and so she climbed onto me knowing that she had faith in my skills and judgment. Her weight did make it more inconvenient for me, but I've been through a lot worse than this. I'm not going to mention her weight as I don't want to sound offensive. Looking at the gap carefully in order to pace myself, I jumped down to the walkway below where my knees buckled due to Twilight's weight acting as though I had dropped from a great height, but again I'm not going to bring it up.
Okay, we made it down here, so you can get off my back,
I said.
That looked rather painful,
said Twilight.
It's just a minor wound and nothing more,
I said.
If that is the case, then we can continue on, but I suspect you are in more pain than you like to admit,
said Twilight. It's like she is able to read my mind, or is really good at figuring me out based on my mannerisms, yet I've no time to say anything in my defense as the debris was falling even faster, which meant we barely have a minute to go before it comes down. running down the pathway until we reached the next passageway. Twilight used her powers to open the way forward, and this next area was where I battled the Dinolfos, so I followed behind her as she weaved through any debris that was in our way. She then stopped in front of the next passageway where she turned to face me.
This is the final stretch, Sunset Shimmer, for this passageway will take us to the back entrance. I have a suspicion Ganondorf has prepared a final obstacle, but we will not know for certain until we move onward. I'm not surprised that he would do that,
I moaned.
More debris is falling down, indicating the castle will collapse at any moment,
said Twilight. She opened the way forward with her powers, and the passageway didn't lead us back outside like the others, but rather it went further down until we came out, and into the castle's main area, which looked the same as before despite the collapsing tower. In front of us was a pathway which most likely leads to the other entrance, a huge sigh of relief on my part. Yet Twilight could see something squatting down a few meters away which looked like trouble.
I can see a figure who is blocking us, and there is an undead scent coming from whatever it is. Looks like we have a re-dead to deal with,
said Spike.
Why have just the one down here right at the end?
I asked.
Ganondorf placed it here as a final challenge because no one would expect to see one at such a crucial junction, but remember that it will cause paralysis if its gaze catches you, and if it grabs hold, you'll be drained of your life force in seconds. The defense enhancement you received from the Great Fairy has no effect on a re-dead as it isn't technically inflicting any damage while it's draining your health, but perhaps using a light arrow will get rid of it,
replied Spike.
Do I have enough magic power?
I asked.
You did use a lot of arrows against Ganondorf, so your magic power did take quite a beating, but you should still have enough to defeat this monster. I suggest firing from right here, for it will start to move if you get within range of its location,
replied Spike. Taking out the fairy bow and arming a light arrow, I fired at the re-dead where it instantly collapsed, and burned away until nothing was left.
Since it was a creature of darkness, I guess using the light was obvious,
I said.
Using the light arrow did drain your magic power, but it's fine because you do have a green and blue potion on hand. Then again, since this is the end of our journey when we get outside, I doubt you'll need to worry,
said Spike. This is true, for Ganondorf was dead, and nothing else was going to get in the way, so there was no need to be concerned. With the re-dead now gone, we continued down the passageway which went up some stairs before ending at the back entrance blocked with iron bars. Twilight raised her hands and used her power to open the way forward, and it was at that moment where the debris began falling faster than ever, as though someone had decided to bring the castle down now.
We must leave now, for we are about to be crushed,
said Twilight.
Let's go then before that happens,
I said. Upon making it outside, we ran as far as possible until we were at a safe distance, and then turned around to see what was going on. Much of the tower had been destroyed when Ganondorf unleashed his power, and the resulting collapse left it a pale shell of its former self. Yet other areas were toppling over in addition to falling down and crumbling away. It actually looked like it was blowing up in places which didn't make sense, but I found some satisfaction because it was the final nail in the proverbial coffin that was his legacy. The back entrance suddenly exploded, and this was followed with the tower beginning to sink down as more debris continued to fall. Smaller towers began falling in all directions, along with what looked like a coat of arms on every wall having fallen down from the top levels of the castle. There were a few more explosions happening at various locations, resulting in debris flying off of the walls and plummeting into the abyss, and this happened in conjunction with windows shattering, with the glass acting like blades and slicing other areas. I then felt a vibration as though it were an earthquake, but it was the tower itself having sunk down as low as it could, and created a mild tremor several times over before the entire castle had fallen down entirely. All that remained of Ganondorf's castle was nothing but debris which was smoldering, yet it looked like it had formed some kind of arena, but maybe I was overthinking things.
Well, you don't need the sages to help you destroy the castle now. Indeed, for he decided to do that task for us,
smiled Twilight.
Do you suppose anyone could have survived that?
I asked.
There was so much that came crashing down, so the chances of anyone making it outside are slim to none,
replied Twilight.
I'm hoping Ms. Chiarilli and the other business scrubs made it outside,
I said.
Were they monsters who served Ganondorf?
Asked Twilight.
Their Deku King formed an alliance with him because of wanting more respect, but she and her fellow scrubs didn't feel the same way, so they chose to fight against the evil king by selling items in a hidden shop inside of the castle. If it wasn't for them, my chances of victory would have been 0.
I replied. I've got a feeling they managed to get out in time, as they don't like sticking around in dangerous places because of wanting to survive above all else.
After 7 years, it is at last finally over, and now we can begin the long road to restoration. Without the evil king's presence, the creatures will slowly slink away into the darkness to never darken this world again. I know that I have much to explain before my people as I abandoned them in their time of need while in the guise of Sheik,
replied Twilight.
I'm sure they will forgive you just like I did,
I said.
The people have lived in fear all this time, yet you were asleep during the same period,
sighed Twilight.
Yeah, I can't pretend to understand how they must feel, but you now have a chance to do something. Since you're the sole survivor of the royal family, you automatically assume the throne, and no doubt the people will be relieved,
I said.
It shall take time before I earn their trust, for wounds take long to heal, but I know that we will move forward. The 6 sages shall serve as my advisors as the kingdom is slowly repaired, yet the first thing that must be addressed is building a new Hyrule castle which will be a rallying point. All of the tribes will be able to contribute what they can for the restoration project,
said Twilight.
Much of the town was destroyed when Ganondorf conquered the kingdom, so you do have your work cut out for you,
I said.
Once a new castle has been built, we shall proceed with restoring Hyrule Castle Town, but there is a fear in my heart that we may need to prepare funerals in case we uncover the remains of those whose lives were lost when the evil king attacked. Hopefully, everyone was able to escape at the time, yet there are additional issues which need to be addressed. The restoration is not just limited to this area, but rather across Hyrule itself, as all regions have been affected,
said Twilight.
As Sheik, you got to see this with your own eyes,
I said.
No, I could only witness certain aspects in case my identity were compromised. But you Sunset Shimmer have seen what has befallen each of the regions as you effectively freed them from the darkness that corroded them,
said Twilight. I guess Applejack was serious about keeping her safe given she had something Ganondorf needed, and without me around to keep her safe, she had to assume the guise of a Sheikah, as she explained after finding out for myself. Twilight was right in that I knew what had happened all over Hyrule given how I had to find out, and I'm guessing she wants me to provide her with this information as a way of providing for her people when she couldn't before.
Luckily, Lon Lon Ranch suffered the least amount of damage, so you don't need to worry about that, but many other locations weren't as lucky, but I suggest focusing on important places first so as to appease the alliances your father forged. Zora's domain will thaw out of the deep freeze it finds itself in, but perhaps you could somehow speed things up in case King Zora feels you've neglected him. The Gorons may need their homes repaired after Death Mountain erupted some time ago, yet it's a good idea to speak with Darunia's daughter first before doing anything because they may not need help. The Kokiri will be fine as they have a new guardian spirit in the form of the Deku tree sprout, and the people of Kakariko village can easily recover from that fire which almost ravaged them. Shining Armor can easily rally them into doing something worthwhile given how he has been opening up to them,
I said.
Knowing this information such allow the restoration of Hyrule to progress with even greater confidence,
smiled Twilight.
What about the Gerudo?
I asked.
Many will want them punished or even isolated more than ever before, for their king brought darkness into this world. I know tensions between them and the Hylians remains a problem which my father tried to resolve without success, but I intend on carrying out his dream of a unified Hyrule. Because the one known as Spitfire has become their leader, an alliance will be easy to forge. The Gerudo acted in such a manner because they feared their king, but they no longer need live in fear,
replied Twilight.
I guess you can handle things from here,
I said.
What about you?
Asked Twilight. It didn't surprise me that she would ask that question, and I needed a moment to think about how I could provide her with an answer. I told her, because I helped to save Hyrule and fulfill my destiny, I was now free to return to my world. I made sure not to mention that it was a future version of Ganondorf who brought me here, for if I did then it would cause problems. The only thing that needed to be figured out was how do I go back to the human world? I've been so eager about returning, yet I never really thought about how it was supposed to work. Am I to wait for the real Ganondorf to pluck me from Hyrule? Or, do I need to find my back to the past where all of this started? Once again, I had so many questions on my mind, yet there were no answers which made me feel really upset about it, and no one could help me figure this out. By the time I finished my explanation, Twilight felt concerned and tried her best to comfort me.
Truly, this is something which clearly troubles your heart, but I am sorry to say that there is nothing I can do. However, this world is not as bad as you may think, and you could choose to remain here if you wished. But my true home,
I cried.
I know, but not much can be done unless you know how you are supposed to return. If you were to stay here in Hyrule, I would provide you with an home once the castle town has been restored. Then again, perhaps you would prefer living in the forest, which is where you have lived for many years. Either decision would be okay with me because you shall find solace,
said Twilight.
Did you know that I'm not of the Kokiri?
I asked.
Is that so? Then the idea of you living in the forest does not make sense, so living in Hyrule Castle Town would be a more ideal solution for you,
replied Twilight.
I'm also not a Hylian,
I said.
Yes, I forget that you are a pony, but it is something that you should not mention to other people. Still, you are free to live in town, or perhaps live in the new castle when construction has been finished. You have done much sunset shimmer, so being given a place in my court would be well within reason even if some within the nobility would refuse,
said Twilight.
While your offer is very tempting, I must decline because I need to return to my world,
I said. Even though this world has enabled me to become so much more appreciative of myself, this is not the way things are supposed to be. While Hyrule is such a fantastic world filled with adventure, I must return everything to normal even if it means changing things for the worst. Maybe Twilight has a means for me to go back to the past as my journey started there, but suddenly a loud noise came from the vicinity of the smoldering debris.
What was that?
Asked Twilight.
Is it possible that he survived?
I asked.
Ganondorf could not have because you killed him,
replied Twilight.
Something moved within the debris, so why don't you wait here, and I'll go check it out? I'm not going to be long as it's impossible to remove the debris even while wearing the golden gauntlets, so I'll see what that noise was,
I suggested. Twilight shook her head to indicate she didn't want me to investigate that noise, but I had to find out for certain, for if the evil king had somehow survived the destruction of his castle, he could still be a threat. Then again, he could barely be able to do anything, so perhaps he will just perish. I walked forward slowly because I had no idea what was waiting for me among that debris, but Spike followed me, which made me feel a lot better about doing this.
What do you suppose that noise was?
Asked Spike.
If that was Ganondorf, then this fight may not be quite as finished as we thought,
I replied.
The chances of him surviving is slim to none, and you confirmed his death when you checked his pulse,
said Spike.
He may have been pretending to lead me into a false sense of security, for we both know of his manipulations. Besides, if he is looking to fight against me again, he should reconsider the idea because I defeated him once, and I can do it again,
I said.
Don't get cocky now,
said Spike.
I know as it will only serve as my own defeat,
I said. Walking closer to the debris, I believed that the noise was probably caused by some loose rocks having fallen down. The chances of anyone surviving were impossible, and not even Ganondorf could have survived, but I needed to confirm for certain. Upon getting as close as possible, a massive circle of flames surrounded the entire ruins, and Twilight found herself cut off from me as the flames were too high for her to get over using her magic. I drew the Master Sword and my mirror's shield as I suspected things were going to get worse. The sound which we heard a moment ago suddenly happened again, followed by several more sounds as though someone or something was trying to escape from that debris.
Ready for whatever it could be?
Asked Spike.
I was hoping this was all over, but it looks like I've got one more fight to go,
I replied.
At least those 2 potions of yours will be put to good use,
said Spike.
True, but I wish that I had still had those fairies because if he has survived, he's going to attack me through sheer insanity given his rage must be through the roof. If anything, Twilight is still safe, but I'm not sure for how long,
I said. The noises sounded off again where they were even louder, and that's when the debris near the top of the ruined castle scattered about when Ganondorf emerged. He was breathing heavily as though he was struggling to breathe, but perhaps there was a different reason this time. As he floated in front of me, I could see that his eyes were glowing bright orange, a sign that he had completely lost control of his emotions.
Look at those eyes,
said Spike.
It's as though he has become consumed with the very hatred in his heart,
I said.
I'm sensing a powerful aura coming from his body, so it looks like he may be stronger than he was before, or perhaps he had been holding back. Better be prepared to deal with whatever it is he's got planned,
said Spike.
Did you really think that you had killed me?
Asked Tyrek.
That thought did cross my mind,
I replied.
The Triforce of Power enabled me to survive my death at your hands, and now I am beyond furious. You have become a hindrance in my desires to remain the ruler of this world, and for that you will pay with your life several times over. I'm no longer playing games, kid, for now I will showcase the full extent of my power,
said Tyrek.
Really? I thought that happened during our battle,
I said.
Your sarcasm won't save you from my fury, kid, and you'll wish you stayed in that horse world. And don't think that I've forgotten about you, Zelda, for I still have need of the Triforce of Wisdom, and I will claim that once this pathetic girl has been killed, and the Triforce of Courage is in my hand. To think that a mere freak of a horse has pushed me to the limit, but this shall be rectified,"
said Tyrek.
Pathetic? If anyone is like that, it's you, because you just can't accept the fact that I beat you,"
I said.
"It's those kinds of words which fuel my rage. My defeat was merely a stroke of luck because of that transformation you used, for without it your life would have left you prior my castle's destruction. This time is going to be very different, for I won't hold back. You can transform as your heart desires, but it will be pointless as it will do nothing. The mark representing the Triforce of Power glows on the back of my hand. It is a sign that I'll render you asunder,"
shouted Tyrek. From my perspective, Ganondorf had completely lost his mind, and was resorting to insults in order to feel good about himself, but then my opinion quickly changed when he clenched his fist up by his face, and the Triforce mark began to glow brightly on the back of his hand. He then began to withdraw a little before yelling out loud, where he thrust out both his arms and legs. This was followed by a blinding flash which made things difficult for me to see what was going on, but when my vision started to become clear, my jaw dropped down because of what I saw standing before me. Ganondorf had transformed into a large monster before he came crashing down to the ground, and got up where he completely towered over me, but things quickly got worse when two massive swords appeared in both of his hands, and the immense power coming from him made it difficult for me to stand. This transformed version of the evil king looked like he belonged in Equestria, given those horns he has sticking from either side of his head, and those muscles weren't normal by any means.
"What in the world has he become?"
I asked.
"I have no idea, but it looks like you've got to do battle against him,"
replied Spike.
"You shall die by my hands,"
shouted Tyrek.
"What are you?"
I asked.
"My anger has made me stronger than ever, and my rage fuels my hunger for wanting to see you bleed to death. You shall bear witness to true power one can wield if they accept the darkness, for I am Ganon,"
replied Tyrek. Before I could do anything, he began swinging his swords around in an erratic fashion, and I struggled to prevent myself from being slashed to pieces. After parrying his attacks a few times, he managed to knock the Master Sword from my hand, where it landed on the other side of the circle of flames, and Twilight was concerned that my one means of fighting has just been taken away from me. Ganondorf, or rather Ganon as he now refers to himself as being, took a single step forward before he roared to indicate his superiority.
"Without the divine blade in your hands, you have no hope of survival. So what can you tell me about him now?"
I asked.
"For one thing, I really don't know what his weak point is,"
replied Spike.
"Considering this form caught us both by surprise, I had a feeling you wouldn't know about that,"
I sighed.
"Just like it was when you fought the evil king when he was human, using the light arrows is going to be key, but I suspect he isn't as vulnerable to the light as he is stronger. Those two swords he wields will inflict a lot of damage, and send you flying across this arena, so you need to be careful. Also, because those swords are large in size, he does have quite the attack range. I am noticing something unusual about his tail,"
said Spike.
"What about it?"
I asked.
"It's a completely different color as opposed to the rest of him, as though it were begging for something to hit it,"
replied Spike.
"Now that you mention his tail, it does look out of place, so maybe that's his weak point, but I don't have the Master Sword as it got knocked out of my hand. Plus, I doubt my magic is going to work against him given how much stronger he is than before,
I said.
You've still got the big Goron's sword, and while it does leave you defenseless because of needing two hands, it's the only option you have available apart from the megaton hammer,
said Spike. While the thought of using a mighty hammer sounded very tempting, I knew the big Goron's sword was my best chance of defeating Ganon, but his large size proved to be very intimidating as I looked so small compared to him. Was this the result of him losing control, or perhaps this is what he hides deep within his twisted heart? Either way, I have to defeat him again, and hopefully he will either be killed properly, or the sages will banish him to the sacred realm, which was Twilight's original plan. Drawing the big Goron's sword from its scabbard, I walked towards Ganon with as much confidence as I could muster, and he merely laughed at my approach.
That blade is strong, but you are weak,
said Tyrek.
I've beaten you once, and I'll do it again in the same manner,
I said.
Such bravado coming from that mouth of yours, but those are words and nothing more,
said Tyrek. He then swung one of his swords at me, which I attempted to block with the big Goron's sword, and the resulting clash was completely lopsided in that I was sent flying without him having to exert any effort. I collided with the circle of flames which caused additional damage before I got flung forward where I landed on the floor. Twilight screamed a little because she was afraid that I was going to be hurt, and if only we both knew what was going to happen to me.
What happened?
asked Spike.
I tried to parry his sword with mine, and he overpowered me,
I replied.
Using strength isn't going to work as he is the personification of power, so you need a different tactic. Use the light arrows to maybe blind his vision, which should allow you to sneak around behind him, and attack that unusual tail, but I've got no idea how much time you'll have before he recovers. You do have some magic power left over from the previous battle, right?
asked Spike.
Enough for about 2 arrows,
I replied.
Better drink that green potion you have then,
suggested Spike. This meant I needed to switch between my sword and bow seamlessly, but I suspect Ganon wasn't about to make this easy for me. If there was one advantage I had now compared with his previous form, it would be that he's a lot slower because of having a bulkier body, but perhaps he doesn't care about it. The evil king walked forward until he stopped at some debris which happened to be in his way, but with a swing of one of those swords destroyed the debris and turning it into mere powder.
Did you see that?
I asked.
If he wanted to prove how powerful he was, then that was the right way to go about it,
replied Spike.
I might as well take out the fairy bow, and fire a light arrow at his face,
I said. As I was taking out my weapon, Ganon took notice of what I was doing, and walked over to me before slashing me with one of his giant swords. I went flying in one direction, landing near the edge of the circle of flames, and my fairy bow sailed off in another direction where it landed next to some more debris. My curse of being clumsy with my weapons has come back to haunt me, and during such a crucial battle no less.
You need to get your back,
said Spike.
I know as I've no chance without it and the light arrows,
I said.
Remember that you're faster than Ganon, but he has a large attack radius because of his swords,
said Spike. The evil king was standing between me and my bow, so my only option was to dodge left or right, and hopefully not get struck. Then again, he's probably expecting that, and will attack where I'll take more damage, but maybe going underneath him would work. He suddenly swung both swords at me, which I avoided by stepping backwards, but I tripped on a loose piece of debris and accidentally dropped a Deku nut. I'm surprised that I still have some of those on my person given how most were traded to Ms. Chiarilli in exchange for cheaper prices on potions at the hidden shop, but the biggest surprise was the blinding flash which resulted when the nut bumped into Ganon's foot. For just a brief moment, he shook his head, and then he regained his focus where he swung his swords, forcing me to step backwards again.
"Did you see what that Deku nut did?"
I asked.
"It stunned him for a few moments, but it isn't very effective,"
replied Spike.
"Maybe, but if I can blind him long enough for me to get under his legs, I can run for the fairy bow, and use a light arrow to blind him properly,"
I said.
"That just might work,"
said Spike. Taking out of my remaining nuts and holding it behind my back, I moved closer towards Ganon, hoping that he would try and attack me again given how he is consumed with rage.
"What is that behind your back?"
asked Tyrek.
"Nothing you need to know,"
I replied.
"Then I shall find out as I slice you to pieces,"
shouted Tyrek. He took a single step forward, prompting me to throw the Deku nut in front of him, where it caused him to shake his head for a few seconds.
"Such weakness! Are you so pathetic that you try to blind me with a common forest nut?"
Ganon took this as offensive, and swung his sword where it sliced part of my hair off, but luckily my head remained intact as I ran under his legs, yet why did my hair have to suffer again? I then came face to face with his tail, where it did look weird up close, yet I ignored this facet before striking it with the big Goron's sword upon drawing it from its scabbard.
"Grya! Dare you strike at me, you miserable excuse of a beast!"
He turned around relatively quickly, slashing me in the back before repeating the attack, where I crashed into the debris where the fairy bow ended up, but those strikes just now really took a lot out of me, and I struggled to get onto my feet as he walked forward with thunderous steps.
"You are bleeding, kid, but that is not enough for me. I want to see you suffer even more."
He slashed the debris where it collapsed and buried me, yet rather than continue with his assault, he came to a stop, perhaps believing I had been killed, or he may have something else in mind.
"Where are you, kid? Come out and die. If you refuse my command, then I shall tear this place apart until I find you." "I have the fairy bow in my hand, but those blows I took from his swords really took their toll,"
I said.
"Want to use your blue potion?"
asked Spike.
"It's my only means of healing and I've barely done anything to him, so I'll keep it for as long as I can,"
I replied.
"How long do you plan on hiding under this debris?"
asked Spike.
"Only for a few moments, as I need time to get a light arrow ready, but I'm also hoping that he'll let his rage get the better of him, and decides to smash everything in an attempt to get me,"
I replied. Ganon was getting really furious over what he perceived as a cowardly hiding game on my part, so with one swing of his sword, the debris was obliterated, and I fired the light arrow which blinded him.
"Grya!"
shouted Tyrek.
"Now's your chance,"
said Spike.
"Hopefully he'll stay like that long enough for me to get in a few good whacks," I said.
Switching to the big Goron's sword, I quickly ran around him where his oddly colored tail was swinging about, and I struck it twice, causing him tremendous pain, but before I could move, he turned around where his tail struck me like a whip. It had so much force behind it which was enough to send me into the circle of flames again, causing Twilight to react in kind.
"Sunset Shimmer!"
exclaimed Twilight.
"You should run from here, because he is sure to come after you," I said. "I will not abandon you at this moment in time, as that would be an act of cowardice," said Twilight. "If he ends up killing me and takes the Triforce of Courage, he will pursue you until he gets the Triforce of Wisdom, with your life not meaning anything to him. Things could be going a lot better, but so far I'm holding my own despite how much damage I've taken from those swords and the flames," I said. Yes, I am aware that the future of this land is in both of our hands, for we possess that which the evil king seeks, but do not ask me to run away while leaving you to face this monstrous demon alone. I cannot explain why I am feeling this way, but I must remain with you because my heart says that we must stick together as friends. If I must get involved in this fight myself in order to assist you, then that is what I shall do,
said Twilight. I have a feeling that her memories as Princess Twilight are giving her an incentive where she wants to stay here even though her life is in danger.
But, if I feel you must escape, then do so without question,
I said.
Zelda desires to fight against me, does she?
Asked Tyrek.
I am not afraid of what you have become,
replied Twilight.
Don't deny something so obvious, Zelda, for I know deep down you fear my power as it is one which can't be beaten. It doesn't matter whether you choose to fight me or not, for once this kid is dead then I shall come after you. There is nowhere in Hyrule where you can hide from me, little girl. This kid and not even those sages can protect you from my fury. In fact, I am glad you are staying and watching these proceedings as I haven't even begun to unleash my power,
said Tyrek.
It would seem that words mean nothing now,
sighed Twilight.
What do you mean?
Asked Tyrek.
Just seeing what you have become is exactly the reason why my ancestors felt that the Triforce needed to be sealed away. They feared that someone would try to abuse its divine power, and bring this entire world to ruin. I have no idea as to when the other tribes began to spread rumors that we Hylians wanted to keep the golden power for ourselves, but such a notion is ridiculous. The power of the great goddesses cannot be controlled by anyone no matter how strong they are, and you cannot even begin to fathom over what you try to control,
replied Twilight.
Then your ancestors were weak for not wanting to embrace that power,
said Tyrek.
I have nothing more to say to you,
said Twilight.
Is that so?
Asked Tyrek. While she has remained relatively calm despite staring at the face of a demonic monster, Twilight may have wanted to choose her words more carefully given that Ganon was already a loose cannon, and making him even more so would be an utter disaster. The evil king then began slashing at the circle of fire in an effort to cut her down, but this proved to be useless.
I hope that you enter the flames to face me, Zelda, for killing you just like I did with your father would be a true blessing. There is no need for me to do that,
said Twilight.
You're just as cowardly as he was, yet that kid is even more of a coward than you,
said Tyrek.
You should pay more attention to Sunset Shimmer instead of me,
said Twilight.
That horse is merely delaying the inevitable,
said Tyrek.
Again, your anger has blinded you,
said Twilight.
What?
Exclaimed Tyrek as he looked in my direction, where I fired another light arrow which caused him to become paralyzed. I ran around to his tail, and struck it a few more times resulting in him screaming, but I was ready for his tail and avoided it when he immediately spun round.
That accursed arrow has become an annoyance, but then it is your only means of surviving. You may have wounded my tail several times, kid, but know that things are about to change. Did you really think that I would simply attack you relentlessly without having other abilities at my disposal? The thought did occur to me,
I replied.
My rage may be controlling much of my actions, but I am still sane enough to know that your progress is unexpected. I had surmised that you would be killed within seconds after I had achieved this form, yet once again you have defied the odds. Such an unpredictable little horse you are, and one who has pushed me to the brink of death itself. And here I thought this would be too easy. I look even more forward to rendering you to pieces,
said Tyrek.
I'm not the same weak girl that I was when I first came here, I said. Which pleases me, as my aim is to kill you at your best, as anything else is pointless, said Tyrek. As long as I keep firing these light arrows and paralyzing you, this battle will be over relatively quick, I said. Your bravado once again gets in the way, laughed Tyrek. Seeing him laugh in his current appearance was very creepy, but I wasn't about to allow him to mock me like he did in our previous battle, so I prepared to fire another arrow when I discovered something unfortunate. My magic power had run out, which meant I could only use regular arrows, and it must have expired when I used the previous one after Twilight had distracted him. Ganon took notice of my mishap, and proceeded to laugh about it, much to my own displeasure. You have run out of magic. Your own natural power does nothing to me, so unless you have a potion then you shall die. I have a potion, I said. That is all I needed to hear, laughed Tyrek. What are you planning? I asked. To consume one of those potions of yours, kid? You will have to work for it, replied Tyrek. His words were confusing at first, but then I quickly understood what he was saying when he slammed both swords into the ground, causing an earthquake. The resulting tremors caused me to fall onto my rear, yet that was the least of my problems as Ganon walked forward and kicked me with his foot, which knocked the wind out of me. I clutched my stomach in agony, yet he wasn't finished with me, as he then kicked me again, where I crashed into more debris. Now you are feeling my true power. Guess he wasn't kidding about having other abilities, I said. Those kicks didn't hurt too much, did they? Asked Spike. I've had much worse than that, I replied. True, as you've been killed several times only to have a fairy revive you, but this has gotten serious. Without magic power, you can't use light arrows to slow Ganon down, and you won't be able to strike his tail, which is his weak point. Drinking either potion will recover your magic, but he isn't going to allow that to happen by being relentless, but perhaps there is another way, said Spike. What did you have in mind? I asked. I don't know whether or not you noticed, but when he destroyed some debris earlier, some bombs dropped out which served as a means of filling up your bomb bag were you to have need of them. It's safe then to assume other items will appear in the same manner, but you don't have enough strength to destroy the debris. The only option is getting Ganon to destroy them himself, replied Spike. Some should contain magic jars, I said, which would allow you to restore your magic power. Be careful about how you do this, Sunset Shimmer, as Ganon still has some sense of intelligence, said Spike. I wasn't sure if he was capable of thinking despite being coherent with his words, but I'm going to take this very seriously just in case he tries to trick me, which is possible. The evil king walked forward and slammed his swords into the ground, creating another earthquake, and already I was losing my balance as the tremor was difficult to maintain any footing. I quickly turned around to see if Twilight was experiencing the tremors, and to my relief she remained unharmed, so they were restricted mainly to me. Ganon then started to slam his swords down repeatedly, so he had lost control of his emotions. I shall see you dead, shouted Tyrek. Why? I asked. My reign of this world was absolute until you showed up. I should have killed you a long time ago, but I was too arrogant to see the potential problem you would one day become, and I've been paying for my idiocy since. Gray. Just looking at that face of yours fills me with so much anger. I must smash it. I must crush it. I must destroy you entirely, replied Tyrek. He became completely consumed with rage,
and he began swinging his swords around while occasionally slamming them into the ground to create those earthquakes, yet this was a part of my plan where I needed him distracted so that I can reach a nearby piece of debris. I'm hoping it will contain magic jars, but I won't know for sure until he destroys it. As Ganon continued with his enraged assault, I made it to the debris, but now I needed him to come over and destroy it.
Where are you, kid? Are you hiding from me again? Come out now and face your master. Come out, you four-legged freak of a horse. I'm over here,
I announced.
So there you are,
shouted Tyrek.
I don't like those insults,
I said.
Have I gone and hurt your feelings, beast? Then what do you plan on doing about it?
Asked Tyrek.
I've got something in mind,
I replied.
Don't make me laugh. You have nothing which can stop me,
shouted Tyrek. He then walked forward, having somehow regained his sanity until he reached the debris, and then smashed it to pieces using one of his swords. I managed to dodge his blow where my eyes opened wide with joy because magic jars appeared from the debris, so I quickly picked them up before they could disappear, yet I should have been watching what the evil king was doing. He swung his other sword which struck me on my side, and blood started to trickle out from my wound, which meant it needed to be addressed before I bleed to death. Before I could react, Ganon kicked me in the stomach where I went flying across the arena before smacking into the circle of fire where I got damaged even more.
At least I got some magic power back,
I said.
But at the cost of receiving quite the nasty wound,
said Spike.
I know it's bleeding right now, but I need to focus on defeating Ganon,
I said.
Well, if you sustain any more damage, you will have no choice but to use the blue potion as it's the only thing which can heal your wounds right now. If you end up dying, then that's it, as you've got no fairies who can revive you,
said Spike. As I took out the fairy bow and prepared to fire a light arrow, the evil king was stomping around and ignored me. When he finally noticed me, he roared before walking over where I fired the light arrow, which paralyzed him again, and I ran around to his tail where I struck it several times, causing him to drop onto one knee.
You are nothing but a wretch,
shouted Tyrek.
Getting frustrated?
I asked.
I shall make you suffer for your insolence,
replied Tyrek.
I'm ready for anything,
I said.
Such an eagerness to die where you stand, kid, so I shall grant you such a request,
said Tyrek. He got back onto both legs before looking upward at the sky, and it prompted me to do the same. There were dark clouds which must have formed after the castle had collapsed, and lightning could be seen in the distance, so what was he thinking upon looking up? Ganon then raised one of his swords above his head where it got struck by an electrical shock that should have killed him instantly, yet he was completely fine, although that wicked smile upon his face filled me with dread.
The lightning from the heavens shall strike down upon you.
All of a sudden, his sword fired electricity which slammed into me so hard, it caused my heart to suddenly stop, and I collapsed as a result.
I have killed you, or perhaps this is merely deception, so I shall repeat the fury until your life has been lost.
The sword fired more electricity, but I was having my own problems revolving around getting my heart started again. I can't afford to be in such a position. Not like this when I'm so close to the end, but my breathing started acting erratically, and my vital signs began to wane.
Sunset Shimmer!
Exclaimed Spike.
I need my heart to start beating again,
I said.
How in the world do I go about doing that?
Asked Spike.
I just need some kind of jolt that will get it working,
I replied as I stared at Ganon.
Oh no! Don't tell me you plan on getting another shock?
Asked Spike.
At this point, it's my only option unless you want me to die right in front of you, and that is going to happen in about 30 seconds if I don't get my heart going. I'm quite surprised I've lasted this long after my heart came to a stop, but I don't want to be experiencing this anymore.
I replied. Ganon raised his sword again in the hopes of striking me with another lightning strike to my chest, so I got up with great difficulty before being slammed in the chest, which was enough to get my heart beating. I checked to make sure it was beating, and sure enough I could hear the ticking sound, which meant I had just dodged quite a literal bullet, but of course being struck by lightning did cause me to get damaged because I'm not immune to electrical attacks.
Quite the entertainment,
said Tyrek.
You could have let me die just now, but you chose to keep me alive,
I said.
While I did enjoy seeing that agony, I have other plans for you,
laughed Tyrek.
What plans?
I asked.
Killing you just like that would make this too boring, and I prefer to see you suffer 1,000-fold,
replied Tyrek. He then titled his head back for a few seconds before firing beams from his eyes, which I avoided just in time, although he quickly repeated this attack where once again I avoided it by jumping backwards. Ganon kept this up for quite a while, where I constantly dodged his attacks by jumping about, but it eventually got to the point where I found myself exhausted. First he wanted to kill me instantly, yet now he is insistent on making me suffer until I've dropped down dead? His rage must be really blinding him if he is changing his stance every now and then, but it does little for me.
Can you transform?
Asked Spike.
I've recovered from when I last used it, but he might take it the wrong way,
I replied.
Fighting the evil king has proven to be very taxing, especially on your mind because of how erratic his behavior has been. Since you have regained magic power via those jars, you can resume paralyzing him with light arrows, but you'll need to get the Master's sword in order to truly prevail. The Big Goron's sword may be stronger, but the Divine Blade is needed to administer the final blow,
said Spike.
While I would prefer holding back on my transformation, using it now would be a good idea, as I could do with the increase in defenses along with the power increase, but again Ganon may take it the wrong way given how his unstable mind has made this battle unbearable. Twilight must be worried sick about me given how I've been pummeled about since this started, but she will be fine as I will defeat the evil king for good this time,
I said. It looked like he was distracted, so I began to concentrate in the hopes of transforming, yet he quickly caught wind of my actions, and proceeded to do something about it, which isn't what I wanted.
No. You won't be changing this time,
shouted Tyrek.
He's spotted me,
I said.
I'll make sure you never become that horse freak of a form again,
shouted Tyrek. He roared as loud as he could, causing something to appear in his mouth which didn't look pleasant, but before I could react, he fired what appeared to be a fiery breath, although this wasn't fire, but rather an acidic substance. At such a close range, I was about to receive a serious acid bath. To be concluded. Epilogue: The Dark Lord and the Return Home.